London loves to parade its wealth, but did you know that some of its richest black men have built billion-dollar empires without being in the headlines? From football prodigies who learned the hard way to cultural giants who turned influence into infrastructure, here are some of the richest black men shaping London's money lanes. And stick around, because the man coming in at number 1 flips the whole idea of rich on its head. Number 10. Dele Alli, Premier League, prodigy turned cautious investor. Dele Alli's story doesn't read like a clean victory lap, and that's exactly why we're kickstarting this list with him. At his peak, Ali was football's golden child, a teenage breakout at Tottenham Hotspur, Champions League nights, England caps, and wages most people never even see on paper. London watched him rise fast, and then, just as publicly, watched him stumble. He got dropped from Tottenham's squad and soon faded away from the entire Premier League scene. But what often gets lost in the headlines is that Dele didn't lose the bag. He learned how to protect it. At Tottenham, Ali earned millions during some of the most lucrative years of Premier League inflation, ad endorsements, sponsorships, and early brand deals, and his earnings stacked quickly before he even turned 25. But unlike many athletes who chase the next lifestyle upgrade, Dele pivoted inward. After openly speaking about personal struggles, he began recalibrating, not just his career, but his finances as well. Property investments in North London quietly anchor his portfolio, alongside venture stakes and long-term asset holds designed for stability rather than headlines. In that context, this no longer stays the story of a footballer trying to get back. It becomes the story of someone making sure what he already built doesn't disappear. That contrast is what makes Ali particularly unique. There was public vulnerability on one side, but he made sure to maintain financial discipline on the private end. While tabloids focused on form and transfers, Dele focused on preservation, the least glamorous but most powerful skill in wealth building. His London legacy goes beyond money. Ali has stayed connected to Tottenham communities, supporting youth development initiatives and mentoring young players navigating the same pressures he faced early. There's a quiet sense of responsibility there, someone who understands exactly how fast success can arrive, and how unforgiving it can be if you don't prepare. Dele Alli may not top this list in net worth, but he earns his place for something rarer, learning the lesson early enough to keep his foundation standing. And speaking of turning raw talent into something far more durable, the next name didn't just survive the system, he bent culture itself into capital. Number 9. Stormzy, the grime mogul, who turned culture into capital. Stormzy didn't knock on the door of British wealth. He kicked it open wearing a bulletproof vest and a Banksy grin. Coming out of South London's grime scene, he wasn't supposed to age into power. Grime, after all, was treated as a phase, and Stormzy treated it like a balance sheet. But music was just the ignition point. Yes, his catalog alone is worth millions. Ownership of masters, touring revenue, and brand partnerships made sure Stormzy got paid properly for his sound. But where he really separated himself was off-mic. While the industry tried to pigeonhole him as just an artist, Stormzy started behaving like a founder. His HarperCollins publishing deal wasn't about vanity, it was about intellectual property. His property investments across London weren't flexes. They were long-term plays in a city where land never stops appreciating. Add venue stakes, brand equity, and carefully chosen collaborations, and you start to see the architecture behind the image. Stormzy monetized authenticity without selling it, and that was the real trick. He stayed outspoken, clashed publicly with British media, called out institutions, and still outperformed them financially. No rebrand, no dilution, just leverage. London remained his base, culturally and financially, because Stormzy understood something many creatives don't. Credibility compounds faster when you don't abandon your roots. His legacy might be even more valuable than his net worth. Stormzy rewrote the blueprint for grime artists and Black British creatives, showing that ownership isn't optional and influence means nothing if you don't convert it into structure. Scholarships, publishing lanes, and creative platforms now exist because he refused to play small. But if Stormzy proved culture could scale into capital, the next man did something even trickier. He turned global fame into ownership, without ever letting London slip out of the frame. Number 8. Idris Elba, actor-producer, building a transatlantic creative empire. Idris Elba's wealth story is smooth, not because he had it easy, but because his vision and intent came on top of the hurdles he faced. Born in Hackney, Elba came up in a Britain that didn't exactly make space for global black leading men. So when Hollywood came calling, he decided to play it on his own terms. Acting did make him famous, but it was ownership that really made him wealthy. From The Wire to Luther to other blockbuster franchises, Elba began stacking serious acting income. But instead of treating roles as the finish line, he treated them as leverage. Production credits, IP control, and back-end participation became central to how he moved. The result? A career that didn't depend on being cast, only on what he chose to build. But London never stopped being the home base. While his reach went global, Elba anchored key investments back in the city, particularly in hospitality, nightlife, and creative ventures that strengthened Black British infrastructure. These weren't random passion projects. They were ecosystem plays designed to create lanes for stories, talent, and ownership that didn't need Hollywood's permission. What makes Idris stand out is restraint. He never chased loud narratives or industry validation. He simply built, quietly expanding across borders while maintaining creative sovereignty. His wealth doesn't announce itself, but it's deeply embedded in how stories get told and who gets to tell them. Elba's creative sovereignty is his main flex. His legacy in London is less visible than a stadium name or skyline tower, but arguably more durable. He represents a generation that learned how to export talent without exporting ownership, and how to play the global game while keeping local roots intact. From Hackney to Hollywood, and straight back into London's wealth ecosystem, on his terms. And if Idris mastered global finesse, the next name on this list brings something far more explosive: raw power, heavyweight paydays, and a business instinct sharpened by the spotlight. Up next, Anthony Joshua. Number 7. Anthony Joshua, the heavyweight champion who invested like a city insider. For someone who made his name flattening opponents in sold-out stadiums, Anthony Joshua has always moved with the calm of a man thinking 10 rounds ahead. From the outside, the image is simple: Olympic gold medalist, heavyweight champion, global sports icon. Under the hood, though, Joshua has treated boxing less like a personality and more like a temporary cash machine. When the fight purses started rolling in, and we're talking north of 60 million pounds at his peak, Joshua didn't rush to turn that money into headlines. Instead, he did something far less glamorous and far more effective. He started buying London. Property across North and East London became a quiet obsession, from residential units to commercial spaces tied to logistics and long-term demand. While other athletes chased flashy ventures, AJ chased stability, yield, and control. That discipline didn't happen by accident. Joshua has often spoken about watching fighters before him earn millions and walk away with nothing. He took notes. His endorsement deals were structured with longevity in mind. His brand partnerships focused on equity rather than one-off checks, and his spending stayed remarkably restrained for someone with his level of fame. The result? A portfolio that keeps working even when he's not stepping into the ring. What makes his story especially interesting is how badly he was underestimated. Media narratives framed him as the polite athlete, the brand-friendly champion, the safe bet. Meanwhile, his financial footprint quietly expanded across London, touching regeneration projects and community investments that don't scream for attention but make a real difference. Gyms, youth programs, and local initiatives in North and East London benefit directly from his presence, not as charity, but as infrastructure. Joshua fights like a powerhouse, but he invests like a planner. And that combination, brute force paired with restraint, is exactly why his wealth has outlasted belts, losses, and headlines. But if Joshua mastered discipline, the next man on our list took speed, precision, and pressure, and turned them into a global investment engine. Number 6. Sir Lewis Hamilton, 7-time F1 champion, turned global investor. Many of us know Lewis Hamilton for being a quick and qualified F1 driver, but here's an interesting fact about him. Long before the champagne sprays and championship tallies reached historic levels, he had already understood something crucial. Racing careers are short, but ownership lasts forever. While the world focused on his lap times, Lewis was quietly building something far more durable. At his peak, Hamilton was earning over £40 million a year from Formula One alone, before endorsements even entered the conversation. Instead of letting lifestyle inflation eat that income alive, he treated it as seed capital. London remained his operational base, not necessarily where he lived full-time, but where his teams, advisors, and strategic decisions were anchored. Property investments followed, along with carefully selected equity stakes that aligned with his values and long-term vision. Hamilton's portfolio reads like a modern investor's playbook. He took ownership positions in ventures like Neatburger, Extreme E, fashion collaborations, and wellness startups, deliberately choosing industries with cultural and technological upside. These weren't celebrity vanity projects. They were bets on where money, culture, and sustainability intersect. What really sets Hamilton apart is his willingness to challenge the very institutions that helped make him famous. He's been openly critical of Formula One's lack of diversity, British motorsport's exclusionary pathways, and the broader systems that gatekeep opportunity. And yet, he remains indispensable to the sport's global brand. That tension, outspoken critic and top-tier asset, has only strengthened his leverage. London plays a quiet but critical role in this story. His philanthropic efforts around STEM access, engineering education, and youth opportunity are deeply tied to the UK, creating pipelines where none existed before. Hamilton isn't just building wealth, he's building access. He raced at 200 miles per hour for a living. Now, he's slowed things down, just enough to make sure the future pays dividends. And while Hamilton operates on a global scale, the next name built a fortune so embedded in London's daily work life that millions use his product without ever knowing his face. Number 5. Tope Awotona, the billionaire powering London's white-collar economy. If London's professional class has a silent business partner, it's Tope Awotona. You won't see him at red carpet events or splashy tech conferences, but odds are you've used his product this week, possibly today, without giving it a second thought. Calendly, the scheduling software he founded, has quietly woven itself into the fabric of London's corporate life. Law firms, banks, consultancies, startups, they all run on meetings, and meetings run on Calendly. That's where Awotona's genius lies. He didn't chase consumer hype or flashy trends. He built infrastructure, invisible, indispensable, and absurdly profitable infrastructure. Born in Nigeria and later moving to the West, Awotona funded Calendly largely with his own savings in its early days, avoiding the heavy venture capital dilution that defines most tech unicorns. When the platform exploded globally, he still held an outsized ownership stake. That decision alone is why his net worth now comfortably sits in billionaire territory. London became a natural stronghold for Calendly's growth. The city's white-collar density, deal culture, and meeting-heavy industries turned the software into a default tool rather than a choice. Awotona leaned into that, building a significant UK talent base and embedding Calendly deep into London's professional bloodstream. What makes his wealth story almost ironic is how little spectacle surrounds it. There are no loud philanthropy tours, no billionaire branding campaigns, and no lifestyle flexing. Just recurring SaaS revenue, compounding quietly while the city works. In that framework, Tope Awotona may be the richest man most London professionals rely on daily and never think about. But the next chapter takes us somewhere very different, where media, influence, and modern British culture collide in a way only London could produce. Number 4. Michael Tubbs Creighton, the city financier you've never heard of. If you're looking for Michael Tubbs Creighton on magazine covers or podcast thumbnails, you're already missing the point. His kind of wealth doesn't need an audience. It needs a Bloomberg terminal, airtight NDAs, and a very good lawyer. Creighton represents a layer of black British money that almost never gets discussed publicly because it lives deep inside the city of London, where discretion is currency and anonymity is a flex. Creighton built his fortune the old-school way: finance, advisory, equity stakes, and cross-border deals that never trend on Twitter. Think structured finance transactions, connecting London capital to emerging markets, private equity plays that mature quietly over a decade, and advisory roles where the fee isn't just cash, it's access. He's operated across asset classes most people never see up close, positioning himself as a connector between institutions rather than a front-facing operator. What makes his story quietly radical is where it exists. The city loves to talk about diversity panels and inclusion reports, but when it comes to real power, ownership, deal flow, capital allocation, representation thins out fast. Creighton didn't wait for permission or visibility. He built credibility deal by deal, sitting across tables where black financiers are still rare enough to be remembered after one meeting. And yet, he hasn't turned his back on the community. Behind the scenes, Creighton has become a mentor and capital gateway for younger black professionals trying to survive and thrive inside British finance. Not motivational speeches, not hashtags, real introductions, quiet backing, and strategic advice that can shave years off someone's climb. There's something almost subversive about his wealth. No fame buffer, no cultural shield, just numbers, performance, and reputation. He's proof that black British wealth doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it simply compounds. But while Creighton mastered the city from within, the next man uses London as a global chessboard, one move connecting continents, capital, and political power. Number 3. Tony Elumelu, the banker who turned London into his global deal desk. For Tony Elumelu, London isn't a lifestyle destination or prestige address, it's a command center. Walk through Knightsbridge or Mayfair on the right weekday, and there's a decent chance a major Africa-focused deal is being shaped a few floors above you, with Elumelu somewhere in the mix. As the architect behind United Bank for Africa, Transcorp, and Heirs Holdings. Elumelu has built one of the most diversified African-controlled business empires of the modern era: banking, power generation, hospitality, oil and gas. His footprint is vast. London plays a critical role in stitching that empire together, providing legal infrastructure, capital markets access, and diplomatic proximity that few cities can rival. Post-Brexit, Elumelu's influence in London has only grown. As the UK scrambled to redefine its global trade relationships, Africa became less of a talking point and more of a necessity. Elumelu sits right at that intersection, advising, investing, and quietly shaping how British capital flows into African opportunity. Politicians listen, bankers follow. What separates him from other billionaires is ideology. Elumelu isn't just building companies, he's selling a thesis: Afro-capitalism, his belief that African-led private enterprise is the continent's most powerful development engine. Isn't branding fluff. It's backed by billions in deployed capital and an entrepreneurship foundation that has funded thousands of startups across Africa. That proximity to power makes people nervous. Western financiers don't always know how to place him. African politicians respect him and sometimes resent his independence. London, however, gives him neutral ground, where influence can be exercised without spectacle. Elumelu moves with the calm of someone who understands leverage. He doesn't shout, he positions. And if Elumelu uses London to shape markets, the next man uses it to shape conscience, often making very powerful people uncomfortable in the process. Number 2. Mo Ibrahim, the billionaire who made London Africa's moral capital. Mo Ibrahim is what happens when someone wins capitalism, and then decides that winning wasn't enough. After selling Keltel for $3.4 billion, he had every excuse to disappear into private jets and passive income. Instead, he planted himself firmly in London and picked a much harder fight: governance. From his Marylebone-based Mo Ibrahim Foundation, he transformed London into the intellectual headquarters for some of the most uncomfortable conversations about African leadership. His annual governance index doesn't flatter, his speeches don't soften, and his refusal to play donor-friendly politics has embarrassed presidents, NGOs, and Western governments alike, often on the same London stages. What makes Ibrahim fascinating isn't just his wealth, but how deliberately he froze it. His assets are conservatively managed. His foundation is endowment-driven. He chose stability over growth because growth wasn't the goal anymore. Influence was. London gives him the perfect platform: proximity to policymakers, media legitimacy, and enough distance from African political retaliation to speak freely. He uses that freedom ruthlessly. Corruption gets called out by name. Hypocrisy doesn't get a pass just because it's well-funded. In a city crowded with philanthropists chasing relevance, Ibrahim did the opposite. He built an institution so serious that it outgrew his personal brand. London didn't just host his work, it amplified it. And yet, as formidable as Ibrahim's moral authority is, the man at number 1 combines wealth, exile, resilience, and infrastructure at a scale that reshaped an entire continent, with London at the center of it all. Number 1. Strive Masiyiwa, the billionaire who turned exile into infrastructure. Strive Masiyiwa is the richest black man on this list, but what if I told you that most of his wealth came from stubbornness, lawsuits, and a very long view of power? Before he ever became a billionaire, he became something far rarer: a businessman who beat a government in court and lived to scale the victory. In the 1990s, Masiyiwa spent 5 years locked in legal warfare with Zimbabwe's state telecom monopoly just to get a license. His offices were raided, his assets were blocked. At one point, he was effectively shut out of his own country's economy. Most entrepreneurs would have folded. Masiyiwa took the case all the way to the Supreme Court and won. That ruling didn't just launch Econet Wireless, it rewrote telecom liberalization rules across Africa. Once Econet scaled, the money followed, but not in the flashy way people expect. Masiyiwa didn't cash out and disappear. He reinvested aggressively into infrastructure, mobile networks, fiber optics, fintech rails, data centers. His real wealth engine today is Liquid Intelligent Technologies, a pan-African fiber network spanning more than 100,000 kilometers across 20-plus countries. In fact, Masiyiwa was able to build a multi-billion-dollar empire out of it. And that's not consumer-facing wealth, but what we can call backbone wealth. That's because banks run on it, governments lease it, and large corporations depend on it without ever knowing his name. And then there's London, a city that plays a critical role in his story. Masiyiwa relocated much of his legal structuring, capital raising, and governance operations to the UK, using London's courts, advisors, and capital markets as a shield against political interference. From Surrey, his teams coordinate financing deals, negotiate with global institutions, and structure long-term infrastructure investments that that would be impossible under unstable jurisdictions. What makes his wealth especially durable is how it's layered. Telecom equity, fiber infrastructure, mobile money platforms, data services. Add to that disciplined asset management and limited dilution. Masiyiwa still holds significant controlling stakes across his core businesses. This isn't paper billionaire math, it's ownership. Then there's the philanthropy, but even that's engineered, not emotional. Through the Higher Life Foundation, Masiyiwa has funded hundreds of thousands of scholarships, major health initiatives, and partnerships with UK universities. Again, London becomes the base, not for optics, but for execution. Here's the quiet flex. Masiyiwa is simultaneously welcomed in London boardrooms and viewed with suspicion by authoritarian regimes across Africa. That tension tells you everything. His wealth isn't just large, it's strategically placed, politically resilient, and structurally essential. And that's why Strive Masiyiwa not only tops this list, but also defines what Black global wealth looks like when it's built to last. And with that note, we conclude our journey through the 10 richest Black men in London. Which one of these money moguls impressed you the most? Let us know in the comments. And for more such interesting peeks into the lives of rich, check out the channel.